think about the marketing message here. So, so I see a lot of our competitors on the infrastructure side. They're basically their message is boiled down to like DevOps is hard, running a node is hard, outsource that to us. That's effectively their marketing play,
Sure.
right? And that is actually really bad for the network itself, right? Because the more nodes, the more peers that are on the network, the more healthy the network is.
That's right.
And so a big part of what we're investing in this year is effectively like training people to be node operators, run their own nodes.
Nice.
We're going to give you tools to do that, frameworks, code snippets, and then ultimately the financial mechanism to really incentivize doing that. So it's going to be a lot. We're already seeing this is that people are excited to run nodes and they want to do it.
Yeah.
They want to participate in the healthiness of the network.
Yeah. It makes you feel like you're actually doing something besides degenning in on yield farming, that you're actually doing something to further the cause.
Welcome to Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel, where we explore projects in decentralized finance that are innovating and driving our mission of financial freedom forward. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review Mission DeFi and spread the word by posting a tweet to the show. All opinions expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests are their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Black Knox, Material Indicators, or any other affiliated organizations. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests as an inducement to make a particular investment, follow a particular strategy, or become involved with any project. A project being featured on the show is not an endorsement of that project in any way. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Now, here's Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel.
All right. I am excited today to have Josh Neuroth from Ankr, who is joining us from beautiful California today. Josh, I really appreciate you joining us, and I'm looking forward to learning more about Ankr. I'm pretty fascinated by what I've seen so far. So excited to see what you guys are doing. And if you could just introduce yourself to us, tell us a little bit about your
Well,
background, that kind of thing, how you got into crypto.
great. Well, thanks, Brad, for having me on this show. So, as Brad said, my name is Josh Neuroth. I've been in crypto for a few years now. My background is really a product builder. I've focused probably the last 7 years of my product career working in the infrastructure space on traditional web infrastructure, building networks for some of the largest organizations, some of the name brands and social networks in the space. But I've been a long-term enthusiast in crypto, and I've been working on and off with the Anchor team for a little bit over 2 years, and then recently left a pre-IPO job to
Wow.
join full time at Anchor earlier in 2021. So it's been a wild ride, but it was totally the right decision.
That's a big move to leave the pre-IPO, probably a little bit more stable environment.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's so fascinating is at that moment in early 2021, Anchor has had this thesis around Web3 infrastructure for a while. And at the time, like everyone was like, what's Web3? Is it going to be, is it just like some buzzword? And it was mostly technologists talking about it. But what's fascinating is now, even 9 months later, it effectively feels like this is a cultural movement now at this point.
Right. Totally agree. It's really interesting for you because as you were building infrastructure for web companies, I think that gives you a really interesting perspective. We use the term Web3, but primarily we're talking about when we say it, financial DeFi applications. But there is a lot of potential here for it to go further than that and be Web3. So I think that probably brings with you some interesting perspective on everything.
Yeah, I've seen time and time again that just think about when we talk about infrastructure, I think for the average person, it's hard to understand what is infrastructure, right? And so if you think about it, every economy, to build a civilization, to build a city, you need roads, you need electricity, you need clean water, you need all these kind of foundational essentials, right? And I've seen that in the case of traditional like internet web services, in every case, the infrastructure really grew and often was there before the growth occurred. And so as the Web3 space has accelerated, it's just mind blowing how fast the infrastructure side is growing as well.
Yeah. So you said you've been an enthusiast about crypto for quite a while, for a number of
Yeah.
years. How did you get into it?
Yeah, so just like I'm not usually the earliest of adopters on new things. I wait and see how they go. And I first heard of Bitcoin in 2009, which everyone's gonna remind me I need to shoot myself in the foot because I had a buddy that was mining Bitcoin and doing it very successfully, buying like new gaming rigs. And then at the time, I think he was all excited because Bitcoin had hit $1 at that point and told me to buy it. Of course, I didn't. Um, Right, and then it was I would like I read Hacker News, and from time to time people would go, "Oh, Bitcoin had just $300," and I thought it was this interesting thing, but from my knowledge, everything I've been exposed, it was like in the gaming community because so many people were using their gaming rigs to mine it, and I at the time was very focused on building my career. And then little by little, I started seeing Ethereum pop up. Had some other friends that got into it really hard. And so a lot of people, 2017 was the year that I really started jumping in and learning the technology and taking it seriously. And so since then, it's every year it feels like it's gone 10x in the amount of activity at least. So
Yeah.
it's been a great journey so far.
That's awesome. Well, I always love those stories of the people who say, "Oh, if I'd only bought then when I first heard about it." And I thought, yeah, but how many people would have actually held it? If you'd bought at $1, what would 10x have been enough or even
Right.
100x, right? Who's going to hold it?
Totally. You have to just forget about it.
Exactly. Exactly. Until you throw the hard drive away and you're
Right.
combing through a junkyard for
Yeah,
Bitcoin
that's
hard
the
drives.
thing is like people forget there was like no tools back then to you had to like literally write your private key on a piece of paper and stuff.
Right.
So it's good.
Crazy.
We've come a long way as an industry.
Yeah. So, in kind of the normal world infrastructure, what kind of things were you working on in the infrastructure world? Is it you had
Yeah.
server
Yeah.
systems or
So I worked at this interesting crossover on the data center in internet infrastructure side. So primarily worked for some of the largest data center companies like Digital Realty. It's a member of the S&P 500.
sure?
Recently, I was at 6 who just went public on the Nasdaq, as I was saying. Had various product leadership roles there, but primarily was working on interconnecting networks together and building the digital tools, the portals, the systems that do that. So some worked on everything from gaming platforms like Roblox to
Nice.
infrastructure for Cloudflare, the financial industry, JP Morgan Chase, Netflix did a little bit of stuff with them, and then the big Facebook, Amazon, etc. So learned a lot about infrastructure and that whole world is extremely fascinating. And so for if someone isn't familiar with that space, it's effectively the infrastructure layer that enables the cloud, right? And
Right.
so we have these data centers, they're physical buildings, they're connected to the networks, and they host the cloud lives in these data centers and uses that internet infrastructure. And so a big part of the Web3 movement is Web3 needs all this new compute power, it needs all this new infrastructure. And so there's a lot of opportunities to be and to really serve that emerging market and an emerging niche for infrastructure for the Web3 movement.
Yeah, I don't think people, for the most part, understand how much is built out underneath everything before you even get to the things like Google Cloud or whatever else that has to be the layers that have to be built before you even get to the servers that are actually serving up what you're connecting to and
Yeah.
utilizing, right? And that's huge. And I think in DeFi, a lot of people make assumptions that everything is just living on peer machines all over the internet in people's homes or in maybe a digital ocean server that somebody spun up. But
Right.
in fact, there are massive infrastructure needs across the board. And so that's what you guys are doing at Anchor. How did you get connected to Anchor?
Yeah, so I was through a piece of content I had written. So
Ah,
I responded, I believe it was like a core, if you're familiar with core, it's like a Q&A platform.
sure.
And I had responded to, I don't even remember the question, but it was something to do with infrastructure. And then I got this message in my inbox from Chandler Song, Anchor CEO. And then being in the Bay Area, I was able to just quickly, within a day or two, met them in person, met
Nice.
Stanley, our CTO. And at the time, Anchor was about 8 employees or so and a lot of contractors. And yeah, I just really hit it off with the team. And I was like, man, this is exciting. And no one was talking about Web3 infrastructure at the time, but it ended up being a great connection.
That's awesome. And so you worked for them off time. helped them along the
Yep.
way, and
Yep.
then
Yep.
made it
Yep.
permanent
Exactly.
and said goodbye to all those shares of stock.
Yeah. So, but crypto in my mind is a much better hold. For me, I
Sure.
probably would have joined earlier, but I have a family and wanted to see how this would evolve. If I had been single, probably would have just jumped in right then. Crazy space. But it is the Wild West, and crypto companies for a long time were like pirate ships, right? And it's formalized very fast. And still, like you said, it's still, we still have the DGen ethos and all that. But it's great to see the maturity happening.
Yeah, I've been doing kind of this crazy seat of the pants thing for so long. My wife's used to it now. But, the first step after the job was the tough one. So I definitely understand that concern. And of course, you want to make sure you can actually feed them. So that's a good thing. So tell us, can you give us like a high level overview? And it's Anchor, Ankr. And can you
Yep.
give us a high level overview of what Anchor is providing to the Web3 or DeFi world?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So, to kind of, I'll answer that in a second, but let me talk about the needs. So, the blockchain, any blockchain, whether it's Ethereum, Solana, Phantom, whatever, Binance Smart Chain, effectively is what is the blockchain? It's a network of what are called nodes, right? And nodes are applications, apps that basically live on a server, right? And so anyone can run a node. There's a very low barrier entry. Like you said earlier, you could go get a digital ocean droplet. You could, if you have some system administration, Linux experience, you can launch a node. And there's basically two types of nodes. There are developer nodes, or sometimes they're called read-only nodes. And then there's the validators, or what create the next block on the blockchain. So there's a whole bunch of services that just running those nodes doesn't give you very much. If you're doing anything in crypto, you need to have access to at least one of those types of nodes. And what Anchor does is we effectively build a suite of decentralized web services that connect directly to those nodes. And so we have the Anchor build suite. It's tools for projects and developers. If you're a developer, you can get a free endpoint and immediately, without worrying about like launching a node, you can start connecting to the blockchain and talking to it. We see most of our kind of paid users are coming from projects that are scaling of users, DeFi websites, NFT marketplaces. Starting to see more and more traditional institutions that aren't Web3 native coming in and using our infrastructure, which is awesome to see that
That's great.
adoption.
Yeah.
Yep. And then on the other side, we have a product suite called Anchor Earn, formerly called StakeFi. And that's effectively makes it very easy to stake your crypto to a validator and earn passive rewards for that.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so I think everyone out listening is probably familiar with having to connect to an endpoint from their wallet, right? So they have this address that they have to put in. And what you're providing is the ability for developers to actually either develop and test and launch utilizing this infrastructure of nodes that you provide to them. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So one of the things is once you start building a project with real production traffic, you're scaling to thousands, tens of thousands of users, you can't rely on a single node anymore. You really need to use a node cluster. You need geographical redundancy. At the moment, we're putting servers with nodes in countries and in places like Mumbai, Dubai, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, Australia. And that helps give those users, those DeFi users in those places, a much better experience because they're connected to a node that's nearby. So there's less latency in the network,
Sure.
right? So it's when you, if this is going to go very similar to how, it went in like the Web 2 space, where as the growth happens, you need more sophisticated solutions and networking to effectively scale the network to handle the growth.
Yeah. And I think people assume, like I was talking about earlier, that this thing just scales automatically. And what they don't realize is that there's a ton of infrastructure being provided and servers all over the world that people have to connect to. I can remember when Polygon really started to heat up in popularity and
Yep.
the endpoints were overwhelmed.
Yep.
And so even just connecting to do a transaction was brutal, just painful. They then, I think, launched a universal endpoint where
Yeah.
everyone could connect to that, and it round robins them to other
So
ones.
sure. So exactly. So actually, that's a great point. I'm glad you said that because polygon-rpc.com is the aggregator. That's actually owned and operated by Anchor.
Nice.
So
And I promise I wasn't setting him up for that, people. That that's
yep.
awesome.
Yeah. So what's great about this, and this is a great segue because what we're able to do with kind of this aggregator is we're able to combine all these nodes together in a pool. And so we have nodes from some of our direct competitors providing traffic to that endpoint.
Wow.
Polygon Foundation is incentivizing some of the providers to do that. And it's a community service. I think there's obviously, if you're like that's mostly for the DeFi users, the MetaMask users that want to connect, but there are a substantial amount of projects that do use that.
So from a developer perspective, when they're working with you, is it just primarily to provision nodes and be able to automate the provisioning of nodes, or are there other things that you guys are going to provide or do provide
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, so I think it's a question that comes up a lot in the community. So, first of all, like for our strategy point of view, we just want to make it really easy to connect to the node infrastructure, and we're in the process of decentralizing it. We started off with basically making like a centralized service,
Right.
right? Where we ran all the nodes, the load balancer, all the infrastructure, and now we're starting to decentralize that and use what Anchor protocol to pay out Anchor tokens to node providers. Long term, what we end up doing with this is we start creating more and more advanced solutions that run on top of that infrastructure. So let me give you an example. Like right now, if you're like a market aggregator like DeFi Pulse, which is one of our customers at Anchor, you have a very complex set of code that needs to query a lot of data on that blockchain to pull all of the market movement in.
Sure.
And you're looking at the time it takes for them to pull all the data, because sometimes it's like a day or two just to run the queries. And so we're building solutions that make those functions and those methods much easier and faster to do.
Right.
And then where we go with this is we just enable that through the Anchor token, right? So developers come in, deposit Anchor tokens, and then can use those advanced functionalities to build apps and DApps.
So the idea would be is that in order to perform improvements for somebody like DeFi Llama, potentially you would provide either ways of, and I'm going to show my ignorance here, either ways of caching data for them to access it or spreading the load of their queries across multiple points of infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is something that I think we're in one of the, we do have an index and a cache in relation to that as well. And it's very similar to what the graph protocol offers, though we have they're much more laser focused on enabling like the subgraphs and the data access than we are. But that is exactly what it is. It just makes building those applications easier. But here's the thing that's great is like what we've seen time and time again is when there's great infrastructure, when these tools are easy, it just makes that mass adoption happen faster, right?
Yeah.
Projects come in, they're able to scale, they give a better user experience to their users, which means they grow.
Sure.
And so the infrastructure is like often, I think, forgotten, like you said, but it's such a key piece to making everything work.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Now, one of the things that gets talked about a lot in the space is, I guess they're basically a competitor to yours is Infura, right? And a lot of people talk about how this is a centralized play and a lot of DeFi is dependent on
Yes.
a system like that. How do you take an infrastructure like this and decentralize it, right? I mean, I think obviously that's an awesome competitive advantage for you guys, but how does something like that work when you go from having these servers? Is this something where people within your network are actually deploying servers themselves and providing them as nodes for you got your
Yep.
infrastructure to utilize? Is that how that works?
That's right. That's exactly right. So a lot of the nodes that are serving Anchor protocol right now are effectively, we just get that, we can just send traffic to them. Like we don't control those nodes. So yeah, I mean, Infura has done an amazing job. It's owned by Consensus. I think the 2 points is that it's done an amazing job to help with adoption. They were very early in the space, right? And have built a great solution. But you are right. It is completely centralized, not from a governance perspective, as well as I believe, as far as I know, they still host everything on Amazon Web Services as well.
Right.
Right. And so you're going to see, we have other competitors like Alchemy. I'm sure Alchemy talks a lot about being the AWS of crypto. And I think, long term, how does this go? Really, who's going to be the AWS of crypto? It's probably going to be AWS. Um, so
That's a great line.
yeah, I mean,
Why wouldn't they just do it and
totally.
buy them?
Yeah, exactly. Like the, long term, the AWSs, the Google Cloud, the Oracles, the Cloudflares of the world are launching, like these connect these like infrastructure solutions to for node infrastructure, right? And so our thesis is really to be a community owned and operated version of this, right? Where
Right.
anyone can provide a node. We're bringing staking to the full nodes. So this is a really, I don't want to miss that. That's a really important point that we don't have launched quite yet, but we're working very hard on it. I can talk a little bit about that
Yeah, I
in a
definitely
second,
want to
but
climb into that in a bit.
yeah, but that's effectively what we want to do is be the community owned and governed version of Infura, the decentralized version.
And look, I think relative to, I, I, I think there's a play for projects that won't care and will just use whatever company is hosting at AWS. But I think in terms of mission based projects and projects that believe in what we're all trying to create here, that a choice like Anchor's, to me, far superior, right? And I obviously don't have any detailed inner understanding of the inner workings of the other competitors, but given the option, it seems to me one that has spread out amongst stakeholders within your network is a better solution. Also, from a fault tolerance and a safety and security perspective, it seems better to me. So, as long as the tools you guys are building to access those nodes
Yeah.
perform,
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think ultimately think about the marketing message here. So, so I see a lot of our competitors on the infrastructure side, they say they're basically their message is boiled down to like DevOps is hard, running a node is hard, outsource that to us. That's effectively their marketing play,
sure,
right? And that is actually really bad for the network itself, right? Because the more nodes, the more peers that are on the network, the more healthy the network is.
that's right.
And so a big part of what we're investing in this year is effectively like training people to be node operators, run their own nodes.
Nice.
We're going to give you tools to do that, frameworks, code snippets, and then ultimately the financial mechanism to really incentivize doing that. So it's going to be a lot. We're already seeing this is that people are excited to run nodes and they want to do it. They want
Yeah.
that. They want to participate in the healthiness of the network.
Yeah. It makes you feel like you're actually doing something besides degenning in on yield farming, that you're actually doing something to further the cause, right? So I think you guys are opening the door up from that perspective. Plus, if someone can earn income from providing that, it's just a bonus on top of that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's important because there's so many reasons why we should not build like centralized infrastructure and give and sure there should if someone's providing a great solution, centralized solution, it's helping with the growth. But long term, if that protocol or that project or that VC backed company gets too powerful, it creates all sorts of issues. So let me give you a good example. If everyone uses Infura or connecting to the blockchain, then they're effectively the data that Infura is feeding them is is going to be distributed to all these different projects. So and I'm sure consensus would never do this, and Infiro's team would never do this. But if they decided that they wanted to manipulate the market, maybe they just feeding a couple of blocks and a couple of transactions delayed or a little bit like that, you could have a massive advantage for some trading right in the
Sure.
market. And just like something like that, it's very important that we as a community focus on decentralizing the infrastructure.
And then they become an attack vector, right? Like an outage affects the entire network. A court order takes down the entire blockchain. If someone finally decides that everything we're doing is a threat, you take down a huge section and segment of the blockchain and functionality. And I don't mean the literal blockchain would shut down. I just mean access to it, right? And access of the dApps where people's money are. So yeah, no, I totally agree with this vision and this approach. Not that you need my approval, but I think it makes a ton of sense. And and hopefully the community will galvanize around that model. That makes a lot of sense. How does the how does the revenue within Anchor work? I mean, if I'm a developer deploying a dApp and utilizing your infrastructure, am I paying you for that infrastructure, or is it something where I just have to
Yeah.
hold the tokens, or how does that work?
Sure, sure. So like I said earlier, we've started to so I'm not if you're familiar with the concept of product market fit, right?
Sure.
And it's really hard to build from the get-go a decentralized service and also get product market fit. And for your listeners, product market fit is just like building that great product that the market really wants. And we've seen centralized services like Coinbase or OpenSea really helped with mass adoption, but they've solved some of those UX issues and customer issues through being centralized. And so we started out as a centralized entity, and that's we've been very careful, especially with like our capital and our cap table and investors on how that's structured so that we can be a decentralized service in that aspect. And so to answer your question, how does it work? For an individual developer, if you're getting started, you're probably just going to use either like our free API or some of the public RPCs that we have out there. But as soon as you start scaling and need like a service level agreement, you need customer success, you want to have reliability and guaranteed reliability, that's the point where you need to pay. And so we have some of our projects are paying us an Anchor token. Others are using stablecoin. And of course, we have a lot of customers just on a standard, contract where they're just wiring us funds. But where we're going as we decentralize is that all of that will be facilitated through the Anchor token.
Awesome. So all the payments will come in via Anchor, and that's obviously makes sense. If you're allowing people to create their own nodes and earn from having those nodes, then you want a universal token that's going to be facilitating all that.
Yeah, so let me talk about this because I mentioned staking for the full nodes. So this is a lot of technical insights, and you stop me if you feel like I'm going too deep in this. But so if you think about it, anyone can run a validator, or let's say you run an Ethereum validator. To do that, you need for a beacon chain or Ethereum 2, you need 32 Ethereum to run your own validator, right?
Right.
Which is quite a substantial amount for most people.
Sure.
And then you're going to earn effectively an APR on that validator, right? You're earning rewards as that validator helps contribute new blocks to networks. So you're earning ETH for staking ETH, right?
Sure.
But then on the full node, the developer node, there's no native incentive mechanism in the Ethereum blockchain to run one of those, like what I call full nodes, those developer nodes, right? And so this is an issue because as we're talking about, people then are like, okay, there's no unless you're building a project or a developer, there's no incentive for an average person to run those nodes. But then the network does depend on those nodes,
Of course.
right? Right. And so what we're doing with Anchor token is we're effectively bringing that staking and that financial mechanism to incentivize people to run those developer nodes, right? And so they're paid out in Anchor tokens. We take payment in Anchor tokens, and you contribute that idle compute power, the compute power of that node into these like aggregators that we built to power these TApps in the DeFi space.
That's awesome. I love that model, and it obviously makes a ton of sense. You want to have those. I mean, look, the entire reason that crypto works, blockchain works, is aligning incentives, right? And so being able to align incentives on the infrastructure and decentralizing that makes complete sense. I think that's an awesome model, really is. Um, from I wanted to ask you, is this Ethereum mainnet only now? Or are you guys looking at other layer ones? What?
No, we are multi-chain, and we're
Polygon.
we've worked with about 50 different protocols. Some of those are like on the long tail, lesser known, and still working and getting adoption. But we're focusing on about 15 chains right now.
Okay.
I'd say our largest are Phantom, Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, and Ethereum. We've definitely seen a lot of growth on other chains like Arbitrum. I don't know, Solana's growing as well. So yeah, it's definitely a multi-chain future. We're very bullish on that.
That's great. That's great. Are there other components of the network that you guys envision tackling later on? Or is this kind of something you feel like is such a big job to take on that this will be the focus for at least the near term for Inc?
Well, here's the thing is that I think this is where we're investing a lot of our future, like our innovation and our R&D around is how do we become a better middleware solution between all the layer ones in the space.
Wow.
So if you think about it, this year, there's a lot of speculation starting in kind of like it's 2022. Last year in 2021, there's a lot of speculation around like the ETH killer or who is going to be like the next layer one. So we saw over the summer, you had Cardano started pumping all the way up to $3. And obviously it's gone down since then. As they were launched smart contracts, you saw Solana rising. You saw really Phantom 10x in July, August, September 2021. So all these chains are getting developer adoption, and they're all solving like key issues or key frustrations around what Ethereum has pioneered. And so what the big problem is that when you're on one of these networks, if I have, say, a stable coin on Binance Smart Chain, I can't just send that to Ethereum, right? It's siloed in that ecosystem. So we see developers and projects being like, okay, what chain do I launch on first, right? Or what NFT collection do I launch it on Solana? Do I launch it on Ethereum? And there's trade-offs, right?
Right.
And so a big part of Anchor's future, as we perfect this ground layer, we're starting to work on this multi-chain infrastructure, making assets easy to transfer from one chain, one network to another chain, and doing that through code, right? And so this is one of the reasons I was so bullish about joining myself to Anchor,
Nice.
is because I actually don't think there is an ETH killer. I think there'll be platforms like Anchor that are going to glue everything together,
Yep.
right? Long term, and make everything seamless. And I've seen this in my background, in my background, the middleware, it's not that sexy. No one wants to say middleware, right? but the platforms that really, I've seen this in the cloud and the enterprise space, the middleware solutions take a large, they're very profitable,
Uh-huh.
and they are very timeless because of it's a very important service. And the reason is because if you think about it, let's say we're trying to bridge assets from, say, Solana to Ethereum and make those two blockchains work together, is that the Ethereum Foundation has an open source development team. Solana's a little bit more centralized, but still a lot of contributors that are working with the Solana Foundation. And it's just, they're never going to be on the same page. So they're focused on building their protocol, their chain.
Of course.
There needs to be like a middle player that synthesizes those and makes them work together as all the latest updates come out for each chain. And that's exactly what our kind of future roadmap is around making the multi-chain infrastructure space work.
That's fantastic. I will tell you that at least every other day on our lunchtime show, we talk about multi-chain and seamless interface and where that's going. We actually talk about a lot of things that are happening currently online. Founder of Synthetics did a nice tweet thread yesterday on utilizing Synthetics as a bridge, which I found pretty fascinating. But I definitely think that's a beautiful place for you guys to be, and it makes complete sense. As you're connecting and interacting with all these different networks, you're in a very unique position to be a seamless bridge so that ultimately the end user doesn't care what chain they're on.
Yeah,
And they can leverage it.
exactly. And something to add to that is we've been, um, in order, I'd say our strategy is it's a long-term strategy, and it's slowly beginning to snowball as it's taking shape. And I'm very excited about it. And so one thing that we talked a little bit about some of our competitors, Infura, Infura doesn't run validators. They just run the developer infrastructure.
Right.
Right. And so Anchor, with our Anchor Earn platform, we have almost at the moment about 650 million worth of assets staked on our protocol and our platform. And long term, that the financial infrastructure is going to be very important for bridging these chains in this multi-chain future.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes complete sense for you all to be at the hub of that if you can pull it off. I think that's a really good strategy. I would assume as well, and I don't know how much of this is available to you, but I would assume you were talking earlier about developers making decisions about where they're going to start, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, you want to get them to the point where it doesn't matter where they start. But in terms of the infrastructure you have, is there also insights you gain about trends, things that are happening on these networks, the types of traffic that are traversing them? Could be geographic, it could be
Yes. Yes,
dApps,
absolutely.
that kind of thing. Is that something also that can be valuable to developers in your network as well as to the overall ecosystem?
Yeah. You're right. By, just like I said earlier, by being an infrastructure player, we have a lot of data that we can look into. So some interesting trends just to call out. We're here in the US, and I think if you think about it, there's like Ethereum is very talked about in Western countries, right? In the United States, EU, UK, etc. But chains like Binance Smart Chain are absolutely killing it in the emerging markets,
Right.
right? Like we've seen just the like Binance Smart Chain is doing like 10 times the volume of transactions that Ethereum is doing now. And that
Wow.
growth is happening in places like Nigeria and India and, Philippines and Malaysia and Indonesia. And as those users are coming on, as those people are coming into the crypto ecosystem in the Web3, they're using chains like Binance Smart Chain,
Nice.
right? And so because of those low gas fees and Binance is everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know what is the stigma against the Binance Smart Chain. Sometimes we see that in the US here, but they're absolutely blowing it out of the water. in emerging markets. Phantom's definitely also has a huge, emerging market ecosystem as well. Phantom, I think is still a lesser known layer one, but very growing, and we'll see how this progresses. But yeah, there's some great traction happening out there.
That's interesting. Look, I mean, I think Binance was so very Asia focused at the beginning, and then banning US customers because they had to, that it's very difficult for Westerners to have an affinity for the brand.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that occurred was when Binance first launched, so many rug pulls and scams hit it first. And that because they knew how many retail traders were on that platform coming from Binance.com, that they were trying to take advantage of that. And I think that tainted the reputation. I still think there's a lot of good happening there. So it's interesting. Um, yeah. And so back real quickly on that data point, I would assume that somebody like a DeFi llama eventually could be utilizing your infrastructure if you were able to expose to them data in an API that would not only the way your infrastructure functions would improve their performance, but also the insights that they could glean from the networks and what's happening on them. You could almost become a partner to them in terms of the products, the
Absolutely.
services they're providing, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing already. We announced a couple, what was it, about 2 months ago, we announced a product called Anchor Scan. It's a MVP in beta at the moment. The address is anchorscan.io. You
Cool.
can go visit that. We've integrated, it's basically Ether scan for multi-chain, right? Have about a dozen chains on there right now. And, long term, as we're working on exposing the API as a product that is available only through the Anchor token. And then that's exactly what we do. We start partnering with the DeFi llamas of the world. And so incorporating the token utility into that.
That's phenomenal. Wow. You guys are you're at least making all the right moves that are coming to my head. So
Yeah.
I feel validated. That's awesome.
I think it's like a blessing and a curse because I think in this space, it moves so fast. And there's all these projects that come out. You're like a flash in the pan. They launch, there's a lot of hype, people ape into the token, and then they just slowly like zombie kind of give updates. But what we're doing at Anchor is so fundamental.
Yeah.
It's fundamental infrastructure. There's every use case in crypto needs this infrastructure. So
Sure.
that's what makes me excited about it every day.
And it's funny because I was just talking today on our other show that the projects that I'm most interested in kind of a fundamental based investment are the ones that are providing infrastructure, have a purpose potentially in real life sooner than other projects, and that have a hardcore community developing and building around them, not just shilling and promoting them. Actually, people actually building things. Like I can see that in the Olympus DAO community and the Alchemy community. And I think you guys are so perfectly positioned for a community that ends up saying, not only am I part of the infrastructure, right? So that's a galvanizing force for growth and community is the fact that I am providing a node to this infrastructure that makes me money that actually serves the entire crypto world, but also that it's a no brainer for developers and people with ideas to be a part of the community and start leveraging what you guys are building out, which also helps you guys to identify opportunities. Well, I see a ton of potential there for projects to be building on that are also part of the Anchor community.
Right, right. Yes, exactly. So we're excited. We're aggressively hiring this year. We had doubled our team recently and we're about to double it again.
Wow. How many people?
Yeah, globally now, we're right around 100.
Wow.
We have a significant team in some countries that don't use LinkedIn. So if you looked at our LinkedIn, you'll probably see 40 people. We're much bigger than that. But yeah, we're trying to get to about 200 by the summer. So I've been almost all
Wow.
my days now are just
Wow.
interviewing.
Yeah. So much for product.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of, so we get a lot of questions about jobs in the space. So what kind of gigs besides I'm sure engineering, but actually
Yeah.
you may be looking for engineering talent that's not necessarily Solidity devs as well.
That's right. That's right. So we just hired a Linux, system administrator, and we've had a lot of SREs, DevOps people on our team, but increasingly we want experts in Linux. And so I think there's room for some talent that maybe is like traditional IT infrastructure,
Right.
right? That maybe they're working for a managed service provider, or in this case, the candidate we just hired was working in the oil and gas industry, but they have
Wow.
phenomenal Linux experience and they know crypto. They're a crypto enthusiast. And they're a perfect fit,
Nice.
right? So I don't know. I wish I could say we're hiring for every role. But I will say this, for people that want to get into this space, right? A couple of things in this. I will always, if I get a good cold email from a candidate, I will always call them. If they write me a well-written outreach, attach something, show that I'm always going to talk to them. And I think that's just a service that I always will do. And then the second thing I want to say is that Web3 is global, right? And so I think what we're seeing, I'm here in SF, Silicon Valley, and it's historically such a huge tech ecosystem, but we're finding great talent all over the world. It's not
Right.
congregated in one city, one place. And so we don't really care where that candidate is at. We do try to align time zones and things, but it doesn't always work that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you're hiring on the technical side primarily. Are you also hiring people for biz dev and marketing and
Yep.
operational
Yep.
stuff as well?
All of it. Yes,
Great.
all of it. So we're at that scale up stage now where we need all those like middle managers, where we need business operations, marketing. We just hired like a tax and accounting person. Really, I honestly, it's all the roles right now.
Okay, awesome. I'll let everybody know on the shows because I get those questions regularly. We have a lot of people listening to our lunch show that are new to the space but have unbelievable skills. Messaged me the other day who has 15 years of hardcore digital marketing expertise. And I said, look, just come in and learn what's happening here, volunteer in a DAO, do something because
You're
you've
right.
got,
You're right. That's what speaks the loudest to us is I see what's been fascinating. I'm gonna kind of throw a large group of people under the bus now by saying this, but like what I can tell you, we've had a lot of people from big tech reach out recently. Google, Facebook, Uber. And you know what? Like I think what they're just not, and obviously I'm making a big generalization, but I think what's happening is it's not as cool anymore to work in big tech after the last
right.
couple of years and some of the privacy concerns and election interference and all these things. And they're just like expecting that all of a sudden these Web3 companies are going to be like, yes, come on board. But, we're looking for people that are passionate, that are involved in the community, that
Yep.
are just helping out something, right? And
Yeah.
so you're absolutely right. The best way to get a job in Web3 is to just start getting involved.
Yep. Yeah. Get involved, join a project, help out where you can. And look, it's a meritocracy. And the beauty of kind of your hiring philosophy is fantastic because at the end of the day, if it's just someone with tech skills that assumes they're qualified, it's just not going to work that way in this world. It's you've got to actually want to see this whole thing succeed. You're not hiring people just to do a job. And so I think that's really cool to hear that you guys are taking that approach.
Yeah, most people that we end up hiring, I think at some level they believe that Web3 is a calling to them. If there's some
Yeah.
altruistic reason that's beyond that this is a job or I want to work in this cool space, they really want to see some societal change happen here.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's driving all of us that are active in the community. That's great. That's fantastic. Is there anything else we haven't? Oh, so from a staking perspective, when do you expect that normal folks can start participating and being active in
Yeah.
the infrastructure?
Yeah, I can tell you it's not going to be for several months, probably over the summer
Okay,
2022. We'll have some stuff done ready for that. We have, I don't know, you call it like an alpha or a beta, or we do have some node providers actively running, node sprinkle protocol, and they are getting paid out for that.
nice.
But at the moment, it's more, there's no user interface. It's all handled privately. And as we expose that, to the public, it'll be very transparent in how that's being handled. So I always say this, my DMs are always open on my Twitter.
Nice.
So if someone out there is interested in doing that, you can always DM me on my Twitter.
Fantastic. That's great. Anything else coming we need to know about Anchor?
Oh man, yeah, it's what's fascinating about space is like the hardest thing about Anchor and also in Web3 is just how many ideas, how many opportunities there are in the market. I think I see an opportunity to start like a new startup literally daily in this space. And so for us from the infrastructure, we have the infrastructure, we have like Solidity engineers, we have smart contract engineers. Like it's like we could pretty much build anything. So the hardest thing for us is just staying focused on our thesis
I
and
bet.
executing. But we're always interested in collaboration with other projects. And so we get pitched a lot on different things. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is we're always open to ideas from the community
Great.
and as we further develop our roadmap. So.
Yeah, I could see you guys rolling out your own funding mechanism for startups utilizing the Anchor protocol.
Yeah. Yeah. We announced some grants already,
Oh,
to
cool.
help out some developers. We announced 10 million in grants, which,
Nice.
for kind of a middleware solution for us is a lot. But one of the things we're going to start doing here is if there's people that are familiar running nodes or developing apps, we have grants, crypto grants available where they can write for our new developer content section, earn out crypto grant
Oh,
in
wow.
exchange for doing that. So there's a lot of opportunities for kind of non-programmers.
I love it. That's fantastic. I ask everybody at the end of the show, who is someone in the crypto space or a project that you are either really excited about or think is a really critical part of getting us to where we are or getting us to where we're going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna, I will say all of the infrastructure projects in the Web3 ecosystem are a must follows. You have very well-known projects and protocols like Chainlink has a very good brand with the Oracle, the pricing. We use Chainlink price feeds. You have the Graph, you have Anchor. There's storage protocols, Arweave that are starting to emerge, IPFS. I think what just following those, there's so many opportunities in the DeFi space, and it grounds you when you follow infrastructure protocols. So I would highly recommend. I think what I'm trying to say is if you're not invested or following the infrastructure side, you absolutely need to be.
That's great. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Um, I really appreciate your time explaining what you guys are doing. This fits right into kind of one of my investment theses. So I'm going to take a much deeper dive from here. But appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about what you guys are doing and would love to get you back maybe summertime when those
Let's
of us
do it.
out here can start staking some nodes. It'd be fun to do an episode where we actually set one up or something.
That would be excellent. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thanks, man. Have a great one.
All right. You too. Bye.